The choice to be silent when we should really speak is perhaps the most single destructive act of relational withdrawal. And it's almost always driven by fear of what we might lose if we actually tell the truth. See, silence is not necessarily the absence of sound as much as it's often like this loud performance, if you will, of emotional safety. It's a desperate attempt, if you will, to control the outcome of a situation by just refusing to participate. And so we believe that if we don't speak up our mind, if we don't express our pain, if we don't actually tell the doubts that we're having, then we can perhaps avoid disappointing or angering or even losing the person who's across from us. But silence is a fortress with no windows. Yes, it keeps the world out, but it also keeps us very alone and lonely on the inside. Welcome back to Uber Bintegers. In today's episode, we're exploring this profound lie that we often tell ourselves when silence sounds like safety. Now, our mission here at Uber Bintegers is to relentlessly pull ourselves back into alignment and into connection. And we achieve this by standing on two foundational truths: integrity and intimacy. Now, integrity is really about telling the truth, first of all to ourselves, and then to the world around us. Now, we're going to expose how choosing silence is perhaps one of the most insidious forms of self-betrayal that sacrifices our inner truth for external comfort. And then we're also going to look at intimacy. And we say intimacy, simply defined, is into me see, right? I think that's so brilliant. It's the courage to be truly known, to be witnessed in your unfiltered self. And I want to show in this episode how silence is perhaps the ultimate act of relational withdrawal, making the true experience of intimacy impossible. Now, we must dismantle the belief that silence is strength, because in relationships, silence is cowardice disguised as control. So there's this fortress of non-conflict that we should address here. The thing is, why do we choose silence when we're hurt or disappointed or when we have a crucial truth to share? The fear that's driving this is, I think, very simple and profound. It's the fear, oftentimes, of being too much. I think we're terrified that our real emotions, our genuine anger, our deep sadness, our necessary disappointments even, could be too large or too ugly or even too inconvenient for that relationship to be able to bear the weight. So we believe that if we express our full and messy and internal truth, well, the other person will either explode with anger, or worse, they'll just disappear entirely. And so we build the fortress of silence. And it's this act of total emotional control. We're saying, I'm going to manage my feelings by hiding them. And in doing so, I'm going to ensure that this relationship or this moment stays exactly as it is. It's going to be safe, it's going to be stable, it's going to be predictable. And so that's how we, I think, usually reason with ourselves. But this is the core of emotional suppression. See, when we do this, we're not really processing our feelings. We're in essence burying our feelings alive. I mean, think about this relatable experience, if you will. When, for example, a family member says something that triggers a deep sense of injustice in you. And the feeling is this physical surge of energy, a demand for the truth, right? But instead of speaking, we tense our shoulders, right? We clench our jaw and then we say, I'm fine, or it's not a big deal, it's nothing. That moment is a profound sacrifice. We sacrifice the vital truth of our inner experience for the illusion of external peace. And we choose silence because we really believe incorrectly that non-conflict will equal safety. But silence never makes the issue disappear. Silence only makes the person disappear. The silence, it creates a powerful barrier that leads to loneliness in that relationship, where two people maybe share the same physical space but are profoundly alone in their own emotional worlds. And so integrity gets betrayed along the way. See, when we choose silence as our fortress, we're violating our integrity at one of the deepest levels. See, integrity requires the alignment of our internal state with our external actions. And if we're silently furious, for example, but we're acting, compliant and agreeable, we're lying to ourselves. If we're deeply hurt, but we're performing indifference, we're committing this act of self-betrayal. This is why silence is so corrosive. It's like this slow and steady erosion of our inner truth alignment. And every time we swallow a truth, we are teaching ourselves that our feelings are not valuable enough to be expressed, and that we're not even strong enough to handle the consequences of what honesty will bring. And repeat this betrayal a whole bunch of times, and eventually it'll bring us to resentment. And resentment is like this emotional debris of unexpressed truths. And we carry the burden of all those words that we never spoke or that we never chose to speak. And that weight eventually kind of comes out sideways, often masked as like this passive aggression or this bitterness or a sudden unexplained explosion of anger over what seemed to be just a minor issue. And the silence that promised safety, it ends up generating this very explosive relational rupture that we were trying to avoid all along. See, we have to understand that the grief of being misread is healed not by controlling the narrative through silence, but by this courageous act of offering the narrative as truthfully as we can in our experience. Silence guarantees, yes, that we will be misread because we're really providing no data at all. And the only way to stop this cycle is to reject the performance identity that says that we have to be agreeable and non-confrontational to be worthy of love. Our worth must be grounded in our own internal truth, in our integrity. In other words, we can't be investing our worth in the external approval of others around us. Now, intimacy, I would also say, gets crushed by the withdrawal as well. See, I've said this in past episodes in this series. Silence is the ultimate intimacy killer. Intimacy, or intimacy as we define it, it requires a constant, honest flow of information, including information that is difficult or painful or maybe even perceived as negative. It really requires two people to trust that relationship can hold the weight of their combined messy truths. And the choice of silence is really an act of it's an act of a relational withdrawal. So we're not signaling, I don't trust you, or this relationship may not be strong enough to sustain it. I think the silence denies that other person the opportunity or the chance to truly get to know who we are. And so if we're hurt and then we go silent, that other person never gets to see the true depth of your pain, which denies them the opportunity to offer genuine repair or connection as well. So we're withholding the very data, the very information that they need to love us and connect with us better. This would be the ultimate defensive strategy against vulnerability especially when it feels like losing, I would say. We perceive silence as the only way, right, that we cannot be defeated, or the only way that we can avoid being exposed or even judged. But in reality, silence is really the deepest loss, because it actually guarantees that we remain profoundly unknown. Now, we talk, I think, a bit about if we're able to disappoint without disappearing, right? That's the question we're trying to figure out here. Silence really answers that question with a resounding no. See, silence is the active belief that if we reveal our authentic disappointments, or our true opinion, or our honest feelings, that relationship will disappear. The challenge here is that the bridge builders really don't burn blueprints, but the choice of silence is what burns that bridge entirely. It creates this emotional distance that no amount of physical proximity can ever fix. We must learn that true courage without consensus means speaking our truth even when the room or the relationship is feeling the tension point. So here's what restoring our voice and choosing alignment could look like. See, healing the addiction to silence requires a deliberate choice to prioritize integrity over our comfort. So step one in this process would be interrupting the silence reflex. This is what integrity would look like. When the familiar impulse to swallow your truth rises, interrupt it, pause it, and then name the fear that's driving it. And then commit to maybe one small expression of truth in that moment. So ask yourself something like this. What's one simple, non-accusatory sentence that accurately reflects what's happening inside of you at that moment? So instead of saying things like, I'm fine, I'm good, right? Especially when you're asked what's wrong, practice saying something like this. I'm just noticing or observing that I want to go silent right now because I'm really afraid of how you might react if I were to say this. But I need to tell you that I'm actually feeling kind of hurt by that comment you just said. Or you could say, my system is going kind of into shutdown mode right now, and can you give me 5 minutes? And then I'm going to make a commitment to come back and tell you the truth of where I'm presently at. I just need a moment. So just buying yourself some space and time there. This could be the first step toward that other person. It's a refusal to perform and an insistence instead on aligning with your internal state and your external reality. And this is how we can begin to stabilize our sense of inner worth. The second step here is making room for disappointment. This is part of intimacy here. So it's being able to consciously practice allowing others to be disappointed in us without having to internalize that as a judgment on our worth. So we can commit to leading with questions and not with comebacks, right? Not only to the others that we're interacting with, but also to ourselves. So this is where we ask things like, what's the worst thing that happens if I speak the truth and if this person just disappeared or was disappointed? The answer, I think, oftentimes will be, they might be disappointed, but I'm still going to be whole. I'm still going to be me. I'm still going to be here. This is the ultimate act of relational courage, I would say. We're telling the truth, not to provoke a fight, but more so to invite intimacy. We're giving the other person a chance to see our internal pain and then to meet our real need. Even if that other person can't handle our truth maturely, we've protected our own integrity. We've chosen alignment internally over avoidance. Now, the fear that lies beneath the silence is really the fear of being unlovable if we are actually known. But the truth, however, I would say is very much the opposite. We are unloved when we are silent, because it's in that space that we are perpetually unseen. So we must now choose to be the person who speaks the truth in a voice that is clear and measured and focused on our own experience. So a couple of things to consider is that you're still whole, right? You're still human, you're still here, you're still present. And your voice is the essential tool for building and maintaining that connection. Tomorrow, in our next episode, I want to examine the paralyzing grip of perfectionism, especially in relationships. And so that episode tomorrow, the title is the myth of moral superiority. I'm really excited about that one. So I hope you'll join me for that episode tomorrow. In the meantime, would you just drop me a note down in the comments? Let me know how this episode landed with you. Was it insightful? Was it helpful? What kind of challenges or things did you think about that I could have also considered as well? Let me know that down in the comments. Until then, I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.